COVID-19 impacts cities and countryside alike, yet in very different ways. In South Africa, one small community shares how they cope under pandemic restrictions.
Nigeria seeks international partnership in stabilizing national security. President Buhari asks the United States to move troops closer to the theater of operations in Africa.
Taking his work on the road, a Kenyan music producer visits remote villages to record new artists on location, creating a fresh new sound for listeners.
Hello and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Changela at Channels Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent Makori from Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks, I'm Vincent Makori at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Our broadcast still looks a little different because of the global pandemic, but we truly appreciate your staying with us on Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Oso in Lagos brings you that story.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari says Africa will benefit much more from the relocation of Africa Command of the United States Army from Stuttgart in Germany to a location closer to where battles are being fought against insurgents and other agents of destabilization on the continent. The Nigerian leader told the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken during a virtual meeting that there were quite a number of things America could do in cooperation with countries in Africa.
Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria, and its neighbors have had their fair share of security challenges. This is why President Muhammadu Buhari is seeking the relocation of the African Command headquarters from Germany to Africa to provide more direct responses to ongoing violence and insurgencies throughout the West African region. During a virtual meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, President Buhari asked the United States to reconsider moving the U.S. Africa Command from Germany nearer to the theater of operation in Africa.
Considering the growing security challenges in West and Central Africa, the Gulf of Guinea, Lake Chad region, and the Sahel weighing heavily on Africa, underscores the need for the United States to consider relocating AFRICOM headquarters from Stuttgart in Germany to Africa and near the theater of operations.
He also pleaded with the international community to support Nigeria and the African sub-region to tackle the growing security challenges to avoid spillovers. On his part, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says he was pleased to make Nigeria part of his first virtual visit to Africa, noting that Nigeria and the United States of America share a lot in bilateral issues, including security. The request by President Muhammadu Buhari is considered a step in the right direction in the face of the overwhelming security challenges confronting Nigeria and particularly West Africa.
Joining us now for more on this is David Otto, a security analyst. Thank you for joining us on the program. What do you make of President Buhari's call to relocate the AFRICOM headquarters to Africa?
Thank you very much. This is a very familiar call. Recall that in 2015, when President Buhari was voted in, one of his first actions strategically was to call for the relocation of the Nigerian army to Borno, very close to where the Boko Haram insurgency operates. But I think, rather there is a challenge here for the president to make the same call as it pertains to AFRICOM. First of all, AFRICOM is a sovereign unit by the United States, calling for a sovereign unit of that nature, irrespective of, what the perceived mandate is wrong entirely because, this is Nigeria, of course, is a sovereign state as well, but this kind of call can only be made by African countries under the banner of the African Union. So I think for that purpose, that is very challenging. The second reason is that there is a specific strategic purpose for AFRICOM being situated in Stuttgart. It has been established purely for the security interest and to protect US interests in Africa. It talks about partnership, but when it talks about partnership, it's in the sense of partnering with African countries to secure the geopolitical presence of the US in Africa, not the other way around.
Now, in the event the request is granted, where will be the best place for AFRICOM to be located, especially considering the sovereignty question?
I think, that's a huge question. And that is one of the reasons why AFRICOM is located in Stuttgart, of course, because after the World Wars, the German army, was literally, Germany was demilitarized, and the US, has been, giving some assistance to Germany. And for that reason, strategically, they have no objection in having AFRICOM there. But, I don't see any other country in Africa that would like to have the African base in its country, because, of course, again, it comes down to, are you able to control the activities that they will be carrying out? When do you leave them, ask them to leave, and, what is the benefit for that country? So, maybe, perhaps, the president is insinuating that AFRICOM should be based in Nigeria, Nigeria being the most populous nation in Africa, but also having insecurity issues, in the 6 geopolitical zones. So there may be an advantage there. But I think the biggest problem is sovereignty. Will Nigeria be able, or any other country, be able to checkmate the presence of AFRICOM? And I don't think they will be able to do that, considering the operational dynamics of the unit.
I know that there are different perspectives on this particular matter. The president, at least, thinks that there will be an impact when this is done. But do you think this will have any impact on the fight against insurgency?
I don't think the reason why we've got insurgency in Africa is because AFRICOM is not there. Again, I believe strongly that it will have, very little impact. Again, as I mentioned, the US already has a naval base in Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti, and also in Niger Republic. They've got a drone base there. The French Operation Barkhane is based in Mali. We haven't seen any evidence that the relocation of these Western units has, had any positive impact. I think what is done is, as a matter of fact, it's made a lot of African countries to sit down on their arms and rely on these units to do the job. But what they forget to understand is that they are there for the interest of their own countries.
All right, then, David Otto, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. A potential new malaria vaccine has proved highly effective in a trial in babies in Africa. In an exclusive interview with VOA, the director of Oxford University's Jenner Institute says their vaccine, tested in Burkina Faso, has shown a preliminary efficacy rate of 77%, which could help prevent over 400,000 deaths a year, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa. Henry Wilkins looks at the burden of malaria on families in the region and the potential impact of the new vaccine in this report from Kaya, Burkina Faso.
Pella Sawadogo fled Tulgadji village 2 years ago when insurgents attacked, killing her neighbours and brother-in-law. She thought she'd escaped certain death, but last week one of her daughters, Marie, was diagnosed with malaria.
She got some more medicine and we were told to go back home. That was the last prescription she got before passing away at home on Sunday. It affected me a lot. I can't sleep at night. I can't eat.
More than 400,000 people die every year from the mosquito-borne disease, most within sub-Saharan Africa and mostly children under 5 years old. But there is hope. In an exclusive interview with VOA, the director of Oxford University's Jenner Institute says their new malaria vaccine tested in Burkina Faso is showing game-changing results.
So what's so exciting about this result is that 140 malaria vaccine candidates have been tried in clinical trials over the years, and none of them has come up with an efficacy over 75%. That's what the WHO, the World Health Organization, is looking for to be really useful in controlling malaria in Africa.
The Jenner Institute says the cost of the new vaccine is expected to be very low and believes widespread use would prevent hundreds of thousands of deaths in Africa each year. While testing is not yet complete, the initial results are also raising hopes with medical aid groups like Doctors Without Borders, MSF.
If the modalities, the characteristics, would make it well feasible to roll out in Africa, that could indeed be a game changer.
The malaria vaccine is entering the third phase of trials in Burkina Faso, Kenya, Mali and Tanzania, and could be widely available in as little as 2 years. But the Jenner Institute, which developed the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine, is talking to regulators to see if this vaccine can also be fast-tracked for quicker use. The malaria vaccine will come too late to save the millions who have died over the years, including Ouaddougou's daughter Marie. But perhaps by the time Pauline is old enough to understand what happened to her twin sister, malaria deaths could be a rarity in Africa instead of a day-to-day reality. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Kaya, Burkina Faso.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is asking women across member states and the region to get involved in resolving conflict situations. Speaking at the launch of the Guidelines on Women, Peace and Security in Abuja, the ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Mr. Francis Behanzin, explains that women are usually the worst hit during crisis.
This is an effort by the Economic Community of West African States to mainstream women issues into peace and conflict situations within the sub-region. First, a minute of silence is observed in honor of men and women of the armed forces who lost their lives in the line of duty, and for the late Chadian President Idris Deby.
Thank you so much. May his soul rest in peace.
The crux of discussions here is increasing visibility for women at all levels of peace and conflict situations, which would also promote national development.
The guidelines specially provide tips of how each political affair, peace and security division, the ECOWAS state-based force, and sometimes early warning directory can incorporate a gender perspective, promoting inclusivity and institutionalize gender parity in the work.
For the federal government, the launch couldn't have come at a better time, as it demands for the protection of women and girls in times of insecurity.
Consider this launch today as a watershed in the advocacy on the different impacts of armed conflict on women and men and the demands for protection of women and girls during armed conflict and post-conflict situations.
The document is launched and presented to the public. Most women here underscore the importance of having a guideline on peace and security for women, especially as the sub-region is combating several security threats.
When it comes to conflicts out of the elections, we are the greatest, victims. The same thing also in the area of security. So as the department that deals with the peace and security of the sub-region, it is important that we mainstream gender, the women, at least in all these activities.
Gender equality remains pervasive within most Nigerian spaces, despite efforts by past governments to integrate women into the formal sector of the economy. Most times, they bear the brunt of the aftermath of insurgencies. Hopefully, this document can address these setbacks. It's time now for a short break, and as we do, we'll remind you to visit our website,
channelstv.com for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come, weaving environmental stewardship into their faith, Senegal's Muslim Moride Brotherhood creates a cultural oasis in an arid land.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. The coronavirus pandemic has made a deep mark in Africa's mega cities such as Johannesburg, Lagos and Nairobi. But more than half of the continent's population lives in rural areas, which large-scale lockdowns have effectively sealed off. VOA's Anita Powell visited one small South African town to see how its residents are coping under pandemic restrictions.
It's hard to see COVID-19 here in the village of Kamatsamo in rural South Africa. On a recent day, most residents weren't diligently wearing masks outdoors, as is the law. But the pandemic is deeply felt here, say residents, who point not to death tolls, but to economic and social devastation.
It's been a problem, like a really problem, a big problem to me.
22-year-old Pakale Sambo wants to become a carpenter and eventually set up her own carpentry shop. But that dream ended when the pandemic arrived.
Because I can't continue with my carpentry studies. I just stopped. And I can't even start my own business because the money is too low. People are complaining they can't even buy these fruits. They're complaining, they say it's too much money, I'm being expensive or something. They say that.
Data about COVID's impact on Africa's urban-rural divide is still being gathered. But one recent study from a group of Nigerian and British researchers warns that rural African communities risk being left behind in the pandemic because of the lack of amenities like good road networks and strong infrastructure like clinics and hospitals. Big efforts such as vaccination campaigns are much more difficult in rural environments, says Freddie Nkosi, country director of an NGO in the Democratic Republic of Congo that focuses on remote, rural, low-income countries.
You need to keep the vaccines in the cold chain environments. And you need to train the people who will transport the vaccines. You need to train the people who will be using the vaccines, the health workers. So getting all these different pieces of puzzles in a very short period of time, that's very, very challenging.
For a town like Kamatsamo, which has 23,000 residents and is less than a day's drive from Johannesburg, that is doable. And for that reason, residents say they prefer to stay here.
It's better to stay in a small place because we have small people there than the big cities, because in the big cities there's a lot of people. Some of them, they don't know about COVID, they are stubborn, they don't know about, they don't care about that things.
I think around the rural area is much better than the city because there's not a lot of people. Actually, I think it's safe to be in the rural area.
But Nkosi says his experience in the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa is concerning. What little of it he gets to see.
I traveled in over 5 provinces so far, where I see disparity between what is happening in the urban area or in Kinshasa and what is happening in most of the rural areas, where, for example, if I have to start with the health workers and community health workers, in the rural areas, they have limited access to personal protective equipment compared to those who are in the urban areas.
But rural African life has always been complex and resilient. This town has existed in some form for hundreds of years, through wars, epidemics, and upheavals. This pandemic, in a way, is just a blip in its history. Anita Powell, VOA News, Kamatsamo, South Africa.
With the help of solar power and irrigation, a branch of Senegal's Muslim Moride Brotherhood has grown a cultural and environmental oasis in the arid savannah. The Baye Fall has transformed them into a desert oasis by weaving environmental stewardship into their faith.
Under the scorching sun of Senegal's savannah, an oasis has blossomed. Rows of vegetables grow in the shade of fruit trees in a region long plagued by drought. This is Ndem. It's been created by members of the Baye Fall, a branch of Senegal's Muslim Mouride Brotherhood, who believe that labor is a form of prayer. The village was first founded by the great-great-grandfather of Fallou Mbo, who is the village's agroecology coordinator.
The inspiration behind Ndem draws its meaning and its essence in spirituality. Thanks to this beautiful religion, we are pushed towards the love of sharing, work, reflecting on the improvement of living conditions in our environment in harmony with nature.
Mbo's parents and others set up the NGO in Ndem villages in 1984. Since then, the group has grown to 4,600 members who have renewed the landscape with the help of irrigation systems and solar power, and they've also created a thriving craft and textile scene. In solar panel-topped ateliers, fabrics are dyed, handbags stitched, and recycled wire twisted into shape of animals. Some of the products made here are destined for luxury boutiques and furniture companies in France, Spain, Italy, and the United States. Mame Diara Wade is a Long Ndem resident and one of 120 women who process the baobab fruit into a consumable powder.
Women from other villages are happy to work here in Ndem. They just want to be helped so they can continue to work. We're happy to see residents from neighboring villages working here. We hope it will continue.
At the behest of Senegal's Mouride leadership, the Mbo family has relocated to Mbake Kadjio, the birthplace of the Baye Fall movement. The aim is to replicate the success of Ndem. Busy workshops and sprawling gardens have already begun to sprout in a new part of this arid land.
A Kenyan music producer is taking his work to remote villages to record up-and-coming artists on location to offer something new and different for Kenya's competitive music industry. Juma Majanga caught up with producer Presto George in Awendo, Kenya, and filed this report.
Alex, can we record?
Kenyan music producer Presto George imagined how difficult it must be for village artists to get their songs on the radio, let alone become famous. And that's where George found his calling.
I thought it wise to bring these studios to the local people so that at least they can compete or they can sell their products.
George takes everything he needs to record complete albums on location in remote areas in just a few days. From soloists to church choirs, this traveling producer's goal is to find music that otherwise wouldn't get distributed.
This opportunity where we can get a studio where we are, it will make us to air out the good talents that we have, which could not be heard at all.
Making his clan's dream a reality can come at a cost for George, as many village artists cannot afford to pay for production. But George says it is worth the risk to discover up-and-coming talent that would otherwise get missed by Nairobi's big production houses.
If you want to be successful in the music business, you have to move to Nairobi, unfortunately. So the idea of moving studio, that's a very brilliant idea. You take the studio to the people so that they can get that quality. We should do more of that so that we can empower the local artists so that they can get access to the quality audios.
Kenya's music industry insiders say success comes down to technology and the popularity of artists. George says he is confident his traveling studio can get ahead of competition. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Awendo, Kenya.
fact, you have now prolonged properly. Thank you very much. You can go and sit.
And that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has your last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. ChannelsTV.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Changela. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.